Today, let's knit a child's basic backpack from start to finish. This starts a new series that will shortly appear in Country Knitting of Maine News and Views magazine, probably in 2021. And all of the backpacks are different, but they're all based on the same basic design that we're going to make today. You'll have all the information in this video that's needed to knit the basic backpack in the standard gauge. However, I'm showing you now some of the other packs that are in the series. They are all available in 3 gauges in the written version for standard, bulky, and mid-gauge. Also, Passups and Superbas can do the job, not just Japanese machines. So let's get started, and you'll understand how to make any of these backpacks once you've made the basic one. Cast on 56 stitches using E-wrap. Passup and Superba, I do have instructions for you that allow you to use E-wrap for the cast on. In this case, it's the preferred cast on. I'm using my SK740. On this machine, I like to bring the needles all the way out to hold for the first 3 rows and let the carriage knit back from there, because this completely avoids any drop stitches or jams. We're starting with the front casing, and we'll knit 15 rows of the 20 total rows for the casing, and then make 2 eyelets in the center front with an inch worth of stitches in between them. So leave 8 stitches between the 2 eyelets. You're going to see me make a mistake here and forget to leave my needles in work, which they should be. I'll fix it in a minute. It's no big deal for these eyelets, and you'll see what to do if you make the same mistake. A little float has formed. If I lift that float, place it on the working needle, and keep the needle back in work, all will be well for this simple project. Now knit rows 16 to 20. That's 5 more rows. Hang the E-wraps from the cast on, and we will close that first casing. It is okay to hang every other needle if you want to on the standard gauge. On bulky, I really think it should be every needle, and it's a judgment call on mid-gauge. Set the row counter to 0, and the first row will be stiff because of hanging those E-wraps. After that, it gets easier. Knit 70 straight rows. That will be the whole front of the bag. Knit to the left, bind off 10 stitches on the left, knit to the right, and bind off 10 stitches on the right. I'm doing it with my fingertips. It's the transfer bind off, because that allows me to keep my hand out of your way. Since you aren't worried about that, any bind off that you like, using any tool that you like, is just fine. Knit 30 rows for the bag bottom on this new narrower span of needles. Then we will stop on the left on the next row and cast those same 10 stitches back on. Any cast on that works for you is fine, but it's quite a lot easier to knit past the cast on if you use the double E-wrap, which is under 2 needles, back over 1, into the hook of the first one, and manually pull back a stitch. That gets a true stitch into each of the new needles, enables you to get a claw weight on it quickly, and even if you don't put a weight on, it's more likely to knit successfully because of having that full stitch on it rather than just a wrap. Once we are back to the original stitch count, we knit 70 rows again. This is the bag back. Now we want to make a second casing, one for the back, and to do that we need to E-wrap so it'll match the front casing. For the standard gauge version, every other needle is adequate. For the other versions, I suggest every needle. Take a similar piece of yarn, but not identical. This will be on the inside and it won't show, and it's much easier to use a yarn you can easily tell apart from the main yarn. And go ahead and E-wrap the needles. Knit 5 rows. We need some eyelets in the back casing too for the cord to emerge from to make the shoulder straps. Count in and make them on either needle 10 or 11. Either one will be fine. This casing is 20 rows in total, just like the first one, so knit 15 more rows. Then hang the E-wraps you recently made, and voila, we have a closed casing, and you can clearly see the eyelets that we made. If you wrapped every other needle, you need to hang a stitch on every other needle. But if you own a multi-prong tool, you can still use it to make things quicker if you want to. Just make sure you use every other prong to pick up an E-wrap, or just use the regular tool one at a time. Still doesn't take that long. Knit across one time for ease in binding off, and bind off. Here's the shape that has been knitted. There are the front eyelets, and when we sew the sides of the bag together, it's important to keep these casings open so that the cord can pass through the eyelets. The skinny spot is the bottom of the bag, and there is the back casing with its eyelets. Fold the bag across the narrow spot at the bottom so that the sides line up with each other, and seam both sides together. Then flatten out the bottom against the side seam so that you can square off the bottom with its own seam. We need some shoulder straps and a drawstring too. So one thing we can do is buy things like grosgrain ribbon or cord, but we can also make our own mock eye cord strap by casting on 10 stitches and knitting until you have about 64 inches in length. For smaller children, you may not need all of that length, but the interest in this kind of bag goes all the way up to tweens and young teens, and some bigger girls like them for purses, and for them, you'll definitely need the 64 inches. Insert each end of the cord into one of the center eyelets on the bag front. I recommend leaving any excess length and loosely knotting it to take it up. That way the bag can grow and fit the child as the child grows. Please forgive the condition of my hands. I've been doing winter garden cleanup, and some dirt got inside the gloves and absolutely ground itself into my skin. Washing rendered limited success. Apparently there was something that stained in that dirt. Use a big safety pin or a bodkin to thread those ends all the way through around to the back, and go out the second eyelet you reach, not the first, so the straps have crossed in the back. They emerge from those back eyelets and sew them to the center of the bottom, where the bottom meets the back. You can adjust those straps to be the perfect length by pulling them, and you can, as you open the bag, it'll shorten the straps. That's fine because you'll pull them back to fit the child when he puts them on. This is not a large pack. It wouldn't hold a lot of stuff. But if you think it needs a little bit of shape retention help, cut a piece of cardboard, or what I've done here is a doubled piece of craft foam the same size as the bottom, and tuck it inside to help with the shape retention. All the samples are pictured on a child's dress form that is about the size of an average 6-year-old, to give you an idea. And they're all about 8 inches tall.